I rise in strong support of the nomination of Goodwin Liu to be a U.S. Circuit Judge for the U.S. Circuit Appeals, Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And I urge my colleagues to invoke cloture on this nomination. I am disappointed that we had to file a cloture petition. I would hope that my colleagues would want to vote up or down on this nomination, and I hope that they would vote for his confirmation. As we begin the debate on the nomination of Mr. Liu, let me start by telling my colleagues how thoroughly his nomination has been vetted by the Judiciary Committee under the leadership of Chairman Leahy. President Obama first nominated Goodwin Liu for this position in February of last year. That's over 1 year ago. The Judiciary Committee has held 2 separate hearings on this nomination. Mr. Liu's latest set of questions and answers for the record spanned over 130 pages. The Judiciary Committee has favorably reported his nomination on 3 separate occasions: in May of 2010, September of 2010, and April of 2011. So I am disappointed that my Republican colleagues have refused to allow this nomination to come to a vote without the necessity of filing a cloture petition. And as you know, the Majority Leader has filed cloture on this nomination. Senators have had ample information on the background, experience, and qualifications of this nominee, and it's time for the senators to perform their constitutional duty to debate the nomination and to vote up or down on this nominee. Mr. President, I was privileged to serve on the Judiciary Committee in the 111th Congress and participated in a debate of Goodwin Liu on several occasions. I was pleased to cast my vote in favor of Mr. Liu's nomination, and I look forward to supporting his nomination on the floor. When I examine judicial nominations that are submitted by the President, I use several criteria. First, I believe judicial nominees must have an appreciation for the Constitution and the protections it provides to each and every American. Second, a nominee must embrace a judicial philosophy that reflects mainstream American values, not narrow ideological interests. Third, a judicial nominee must respect the role and responsibilities of each branch of government, including a healthy respect for the precedents of the court. Fourth, I look for nominees with a strong commitment and passion for the continued forward progress of civil rights protection. And finally, I want a judge who has the necessary experience, temperament, and commitment to public service. I want to share with my colleagues a little of the background on Mr. Liu, his qualifications, and why I intend to support his nomination. Goodwin Liu, in many ways, embodies the American dream. He's the son of immigrants in this country. His parents were doctors who came to the United States from Taiwan in the late 1960s, when foreign doctors were being recruited to work in underserved areas. Goodwin Liu did not speak English until kindergarten. During high school, Professor Liu had the opportunity to serve as a page in the United States House of Representatives after being sponsored by the late Congressman Bob Matsui of California, who I had the privilege of serving with in the House of Representatives. Professor Liu has a sterling academic record. He earned his BA Phi Beta Kappa from Stanford University, where he was elected co-president of the student body. A Rhodes Scholar, he earned his MA from Oxford University. He received his JD from Yale Law School, where he was editor of the Yale Law Journal. He then went on to clerk for D.C. Circuit Judge David Tatel and Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Professor Liu has a track record of working on public policy issues in public service. He worked for 2 years at the Corporation for National Service. He served as special assistant to Deputy Secretary of Education, where he worked on numerous legal and policy issues. Professor Liu has worked in private practice. After his clerkships, he served as an associate in the Washington, D.C. law firm of Mavalny and Myers, working on a wide range of business matters. About half of his practice consisted of appellate litigation, preparing him well to serve on the Court of Appeals. He's also maintained an active pro bono practice at that firm, which also tells me his commitment to equal justice under the law. Professor Liu then went on to his current occupation, joining the faculty of the University of California, Berkeley School of Law, and helping to teach our next generation of lawyers. He serves as a professor at the law school, was promoted to an associate dean of the law school, and was elected to the American Law Institute. Professor Liu has received the Law School Distinguished Teaching Award. Professor Liu is considered an expert on constitutional law and education law and policy, with a particular focus on the needs of America's most disadvantaged students. He's the author of numerous law review articles and co-author of an influential book on constitutional interpretation entitled Keeping Faith with the Constitution. Mr. President, I heard my colleague talk about Goodwin Liu, but I would just urge my colleagues not to penalize an individual because he's active or expresses his own opinions. We should judge the nominees based upon their qualifications and their commitments to interpret the law as required on the court. Professor Liu answered numerous questions about his approach to constitutional interpretation during his 2 confirmation hearings. He testified that, and I quote, "The role of a judge is to be an impartial, objective, and neutral arbiter of specific cases and controversies that come before him or her. And the way that process works is through absolute fidelity to applicable precedents and the language of the laws, statutes, and regulations that are issued in the case," end quote. I don't know of who would disagree with that. That's what many of us have been calling for on both sides of the aisle. He's also answered questions about his ideology as a judge. He testified that, and I quote, "It would not be my role to bring any particular theory of constitutional interpretation to the job of an intermediate appellate judge. The duty of a circuit judge is to faithfully follow the Supreme Court instructions on matters of constitutional interpretation, not any particular theory. And so that is exactly what I would do. I would apply the applicable precedents to the facts of each case," end quote. Once again, Mr. President, I couldn't agree with that statement more. In written responses to senators' questions, he also stated that, and I quote, "I do not believe it's ever appropriate for judges to indulge their own values or policy preferences in determining what the Constitution and laws mean," end quote. Professor Liu certainly has written a number of thought-provoking articles on controversial public policy issues of the day, but this should not disqualify him from being a judge. I am confident that Professor Liu understands the difference between being an advocate and being a judge, and I hope we can draw that distinction, and will respect the differences if he is confirmed and puts on the judicial robe. Mr. President, the specific question concerning affirmative action were asked during his confirmation hearings. So let me quote from Professor Liu's testimony to the Judiciary Committee, and I quote, "I absolutely do not support racial quotas in my writings, and I think I have made that very clear, that I believe they are unconstitutional," end quote. He then said, I quote, "I think affirmative action as it was originally conceived was a time-limited remedy for past wrongs, and I think it is an appropriate way to understand what affirmative action is," end quote. So I think we should take a look at his record on this. And I think that it's unfair to judge him based upon certain innuendos. Professor Liu also has broad support from distinguished legal scholars from both parties. Former Solicitor General and White House prosecutor Ken Starr praised Professor Liu, and I'm going to quote, "His strong intellect, demonstrated independence, and outstanding character," end quote. The qualifications that we all want to see on the court. We want to see intellect, we want to see independence, and we want to see character. Ken Starr, I think, summed that up fairly well. In a March 19, 2010 letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Mr. Starr joined with another professor stating, and I'm going to quote again, Goodwin is a person of great intellect, accomplishment, and integrity, and he is exceptionally well qualified to serve on the Court of Appeals. What we wish to highlight beyond his obvious intellect and legal talents is his independence and openness to diverse viewpoints, as well as his ability to follow the facts and the law to their logical conclusion. These are qualities we expect in a judge, and Goodwin clearly possesses them. A judge takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and in the case of a circuit judge, fidelity to the law entails adherence to Supreme Court precedent and adherence to circuit precedent as well. Goodwin knows the difference between what the law is and what he might wish it to be, and he is fully capable and unafraid of discharging the duty to say what the law is, end quote. Mr. President, that is what Ken Starr said about a person he knows very well, Goodwin Liu, and strongly recommends his confirmation to our colleagues. I also want to discuss the importance of improving diversity on our courts. If confirmed, Professor Liu would be only the second Asian American currently serving on a federal appeals court and the only Asian American in active service in the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is home to over 40% of Asian American population in the United States. Finally, Mr. President, Professor Liu has received the highest possible judicial rating, unanimously well qualified from the American Bar Association Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary. Mr. President, with this distinguished record and recommendations that we have received, we have an excellent nominee to serve on the Court of Appeals. I urge my colleagues to vote for his confirmation.